when a retreating glacier in Montana revealed a perfectly preserved Bigfoot body frozen for thousands of years. I believed it was the scientific breakthrough of the century. But the DNA results changed everything we understood about human evolution and the origins of these mysterious creatures. My name is Dr. Robert Hayes. I'm a paleogeneticist from Cornell University, and this is the story of the most controversial discovery in modern science, one that powerful institutions desperately want to keep buried. It was September 1996 when I received the call that altered my life forever. Dr. Lisa Thompson, a glaciologist colleague at Montana State University, contacted me with trembling excitement. "Robert, you need to come here immediately. We found something in the Glacier National Park melt zone, something extraordinary." I told her I was occupied with other research, but she insisted this couldn't wait. Lisa explained they'd discovered a body, a non-human hominid body, perfectly preserved in ice, unlike anything in the fossil record. 12 hours later, I was on a plane to Montana. The glacier had been retreating rapidly throughout the 90s due to climate change, exposing ancient forests, animal remains, and archaeological artifacts, but nothing like what Lisa's team had uncovered. When I arrived, she looked exhausted, but exhilarated. The preservation was perfect, she explained, with soft tissue, hair, and even eyes intact, whatever froze. It did so rapidly. They estimated it had been in the ice for 8,000 to 10,000 years, maybe longer, and she was certain it wasn't human. The dig site was in a restricted area, cordoned off and guarded. Lisa had wisely kept it quiet to prevent media chaos and interference. She led me to a refrigerated tent near the excavation point, where the specimen lay on an examination table. When she pulled back the thermal sheet, I stopped breathing. It was humanoid, but distinctly non-human, approximately 8 feet tall, covered in thick reddish-brown hair matted with ice crystals. The face was striking, with a heavy brow ridge, broad flat nose, and protruding jaw, yet features unsettlingly close to human. Lisa explained a hiker had spotted what appeared to be a bear carcass, exposed by glacier melt 3 days earlier. Upon investigation, they realized what they had. The cold and pressure of the glacier had freeze-dried the body, protecting it from decomposition. Remarkably, I could see individual hairs, skin texture, even old scars on the shoulder and arm. They'd taken preliminary tissue samples for radiocarbon dating and DNA extraction, but waited for me before proceeding further. If this was a genuine Bigfoot, scientifically documented and preserved for millennia, the implications were staggering. If we could extract viable DNA, we could finally answer where these creatures came from and how they related to humans and other hominids. I spent hours conducting examinations, photographing every angle, collecting additional tissue samples. The body showed trauma signs, broken ribs, a badly healed fractured arm. Whatever killed this individual wasn't peaceful. We needed to transport it to a proper facility. Cornell had the necessary equipment for detailed analysis, and we needed absolute confidentiality until we had concrete data. We spent 2 days coordinating transport. The body was carefully packaged in a refrigerated container with all documentation and samples. We flew it to New York under the cover story that it was an archaeological find from a Native American burial site, something explaining the security while deflecting questions. By mid-September, the body was secured at Cornell, and I'd assembled a small, trusted team: Dr. Sarah Bennett, a biological anthropologist; Dr. James Park, a geneticist specializing in ancient DNA; Dr. Margaret Stone, an expert in radiocarbon dating. We kept the team deliberately small. Fewer people meant better control over the narrative and proper science before media intervention. The radiocarbon dating results arrived first. Dr. Stone worked continuously for 3 days, running multiple tests to confirm findings. The collagen samples, dated to approximately 9,400 years before present, give or take 200 years. This placed the individual in the early Holocene period, shortly after the last ice age ended. It was alive during the same period as the Clovis people, the earliest confirmed human inhabitants of North America, potentially even interacting with them. But the DNA results proved truly revolutionary and terrifying. James spent 2 weeks extracting and sequencing DNA from tissue samples. Ancient DNA work is notoriously difficult as genetic material degrades over time, becomes contaminated and fragments. However, this body's preservation was so exceptional that James extracted remarkably intact DNA sequences. When he called an emergency meeting in late September, his face was pale and his hands shook as he distributed findings. He'd run tests multiple times, had them verified by an independent lab that believed they were analyzing an archaeological human sample. Results were consistent. The mitochondrial DNA showed this creature diverged from the human lineage approximately 300 to 500,000 years ago, placing the split around the same time Neanderthals diverged from modern humans. But here's what stunned us. The nuclear DNA showed clear evidence of interbreeding with anatomically modern humans, similar to how humans interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. Between 1 and 3% of this creature's DNA was modern human, suggesting hybridization events within the last 20,000 years. The creature was a distinct hominid species that evolved in North America or migrated here long before modern humans arrived, then interbred with them when they encountered each other. This rewrote everything we understood about human migration to the Americas and hominid evolution. I wanted to publish immediately, but Sarah cautioned about implications. If we announced this, every Bigfoot hunter in the world would descend on Montana. The creature's habitat would be destroyed, and if living populations existed, they'd be hunted to extinction or captured for study. We needed to contact authorities first. I reached out to the National Park Service, then the Fish and Wildlife Service. Within 48 hours, federal agents appeared at my lab. They weren't there to congratulate us. They confiscated our samples, research, and the body itself. We were informed this discovery was now classified under national security provisions. We would sign non-disclosure agreements or face prosecution under laws I didn't know existed. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwood, a senior official from a government agency I'd never heard of, explained that living populations of these creatures existed in remote wilderness areas across North America the government had known for decades. They'd been monitoring populations, preventing public discovery, and maintaining secrecy because public knowledge would trigger ecological disaster. Hunters would pursue them. Scientists would want to capture them for study. Their habitat would be overrun. The creatures couldn't survive that attention. I was offered a position as senior research consultant for the classified program. I'd have access to the specimen, conduct research, but everything would remain secret. After struggling with the decision, I accepted. The alternative was prosecution, loss of my career, and inability to study what might be the most significant paleontological discovery ever made. For the next 2 decades, I worked in this classified world. The frozen specimen was transferred to a secure government facility. I analyzed tissue samples, studied DNA, worked to understand these creatures' evolutionary history. We called them North American hominids in official documentation. I learned they weren't simply unknown apes, but intelligent beings using tools, having complex social structures, and possessing cognitive abilities approaching human levels. They were our cousins, separated by 500,000 years of evolution, but still recognizably related. The program monitored approximately 15 isolated populations across the Pacific Northwest, Rocky Mountains, and parts of Canada. Each group contained between 10 and 30 individuals. Total population estimates ranged from 150 to 250 individuals. They were critically endangered, more threatened than mountain gorillas or Sumatran orangutans, yet completely unknown to conservation organizations because they officially didn't exist. I documented behaviors that broke my heart. I watched them mourn their dead in ceremonies resembling human funeral rites. I observed mothers teaching young ones which plants were edible, which streams were safe to drink from, how to avoid human detection. I saw evidence of proto-language, complex vocalizations that appeared to convey specific information. The program's goal wasn't to study them for scientific knowledge, but to prevent their discovery. We monitored populations, tracked their movements, and intervened when they came too close to human settlements. When a logging operation threatened their habitat, we didn't stop the logging, we relocated creatures, often traumatizing them in the process. In 2003, an incident occurred that haunted me. A logger in Oregon shot and killed one that wandered near his crew. It had been protecting its territory, a defensive display misinterpreted as an attack. The logger was devastated when he learned what he'd killed. Federal agents quietly took the body. I performed the necropsy. It was a female, approximately 30 years old, and she'd been pregnant. We lost 2 individuals that day. The logger was paid off, signed an NDA, and relocated. The logging company faced no public consequences because acknowledging them would require explaining what had been killed. That's when I questioned whether secrecy truly protected these creatures or just protected us from dealing with difficult truths. Throughout the 2000s, I continued my work, analyzed more samples, documented more encounters, wrote more protocols. The frozen specimen remained at the secure facility, perfectly preserved, a silent testament to a species fighting for survival. By 2010, I'd spent 14 years studying these creatures in secret, becoming the world's leading expert on a species most believed was myth. I was tired of lying. I started keeping personal data copies that couldn't be traced, documented everything in journals at home, began planning for when I might tell the truth. The turning point came in 2015. Dr. Blackwood called me to her office with news that a monitoring team in British Columbia found a family group, 2 adults and 3 juveniles, but they were too close to a planned resort development. We needed to relocate them. We'd never attempted that before, but we had no choice. If we didn't move them, they'd be discovered when construction started or forced into territory that couldn't support them. The relocation attempt was a disaster. We used tranquilizers to move them safely, but the male had an adverse reaction. Despite our veterinary team's efforts, he died during transport. The female and juveniles were released in new territory, but we destroyed their family structure, traumatized them with our intervention. 6 months later, monitoring showed juveniles had separated from their mother prematurely. Their survival was uncertain. "We killed him," I told Sarah after the incident. "We were trying to help, and we killed him." She replied, "We made the best decision with available information," but even she sounded uncertain. I said it wasn't good enough. We were playing God with an intelligent species, making life and death decisions in secret, with no oversight, no public accountability. This wasn't conservation, it was control. That year I decided, when I retired, I would wait for legal obligations to expire, then tell the story. Not all of it. I wouldn't reveal locations or endanger living populations, but I would reveal the frozen specimen, the DNA results, proof these creatures existed. Then COVID-19 happened. My retirement was delayed, and the frozen specimen remained in storage as the world dealt with a different crisis. Finally, in 2023, I retired from government service. I was 67 years old, had spent 27 years studying creatures most people thought were legends, and I was done keeping secrets. I reached out to a journalist I trusted, someone with a reputation for careful ethical reporting on scientific controversies. I provided her with data copies, photographs of the frozen specimen, DNA analysis results, and research documentation. She warned this would destroy my reputation. Even with all this evidence, people would call me a fraud, a conspiracy theorist. The government would deny everything and destroy my credibility. I knew that, but these creatures were still out there, still dying, still heading toward extinction, while we pretended they didn't exist. Someone needed to force this conversation into the open. The story is being prepared for publication now. When it comes out, the government will respond exactly as predicted. They'll deny the frozen specimen exists, claim DNA data is fabricated, discredit me and my research. But I have something they can't easily dismiss: the coordinates of the original discovery site in Glacier National Park. The glacier has continued retreating since 1996. Anyone wanting to verify my story can go to that exact location and search the exposed rock and ice. There's a chance they'll find more evidence, perhaps other bodies, perhaps artifacts frozen alongside the specimen we found. I also have testimony from others involved. Dr. Lisa Thompson has agreed to come forward. Dr. James Park, now at a private genetics lab, has provided corroborating statements. Several retired field researchers have agreed to confirm monitoring programs existed. We can't provide the actual specimen that remains in federal custody, but we can provide enough evidence to force questions, demand investigations, make it impossible for the government to simply dismiss claims. More importantly, I'm going public with the conservation crisis these creatures face. Estimated population is now below 200 individuals. Genetic diversity is critically low. Habitat continues shrinking. Without intervention, real intervention with public support and resources, they'll be extinct within 50 years. That's the real reason I'm breaking silence, not for fame or vindication, but because an intelligent species is disappearing while humans who know about them debate whether it's safe to tell the truth. The frozen body we pulled from that glacier was 9,400 years old. That individual species survived the Ice Age's end, survived thousands of years of climate change and human expansion, survived being hunted and driven into hiding. They survived everything nature and humans threw at them for millennia, but they won't survive secrecy. They won't survive being protected by lies, cover-ups, and classified documents nobody reads. So I'm telling their story, our story, the story of how humanity discovered we weren't alone, that we shared this continent with another intelligent species, and how we chose to hide that truth rather than deal with the complexity of coexistence. The DNA results are in. They've been in for 28 years. These creatures are real, they're related to us, they're dying. And we've known all along that frozen body in Montana, the one I spent years studying, the one that changed my entire understanding of human evolution, has a story to tell. And I'm finally letting it speak. The government will come after me, use every legal tool to silence me, discredit evidence, maintain the secret I'm prepared for, that because some truths are more important than career, reputation, or personal safety. Some truths demand to be told regardless of cost. The Bigfoot body we found frozen in Montana was real. DNA results proved it was a human relative, an intelligent species that shared our evolutionary history. The government has kept this secret for decades, while these creatures march toward extinction. Now you know. In knowing, you must decide what to do with that knowledge. I chose to speak. What will you choose? What